Hi everyone, welcome to BESL 5313 Week 5. I'm Christine, your discussion leader. This week's topics are pronunciation and verbal-based activities. So why is pronunciation so important? In the Nation and Newton book, they describe a phenomenon the brain uses to help retain information. This is called the phonological loop. This is when we repeat a phone number over and over again, hoping to move that phone number from short-term memory to long-term memory. Pronunciation can help our students use the phonological loop to help them move vocabulary and phrases from short-term memory to long-term memory. A stable pronunciation of the word is required for successful transfer into long-term memory. It seems quite often that pronunciation isn't emphasized very often in class, but now we have a good reason to emphasize pronunciation. It will help our students remember new words. There are multiple goals of good pronunciation, though I only have two listed here on the screen. The first is intelligibility. This is when a listener is able to understand the speaker, when the speaker's pronunciation of words is clear enough that the listener can comprehend them. For example, there I have the picture below. This comes from a blogger who said, "Just because I say chirp doesn't mean that a bird can understand me." This was emphasizing the need to have intelligible pronunciation. Another goal of good pronunciation is identity. Some students wish to retain, of course, their identity related to their first language. So to them, having an accent is what they wish. That is their goal, to be able to speak clearly but retain their first language accent. Other speakers wish to sound like a native, so their goal is to have native-like pronunciation. This is something to keep in mind when we teach pronunciation in class. We do not want to erase students' accents. We want to help them create or sound. We want to help them make clear words so that when they speak, people can understand them. There are multiple factors affecting pronunciation. Brain research shows that younger learners often can pick up native-like speaking at younger ages. You'll notice that bilingual students often sound like natives in either of the languages that they're speaking. Another factor could be the allophones of the person's first language. The allophones are the sounds that are incorporated or used in that person's language. If a particular allophone or sound is not used in the person's first language, it may be very difficult for him or her to learn that sound when learning to speak English. In fact, that person may not even be able to detect that sound or differences between sounds if those allophones are not included in the first language. Another factor would be a person's developmental style and range, how well that person picks up on pronunciation signals. Another example would be a person's previous experience and attitude. Perhaps the person is learning English because he or she feels forced to, though he or she may not want to. That will definitely affect the attitude. The conditions of the current learning experience definitely affects pronunciation. If a student is learning English from somebody who doesn't speak it very well or has very poor pronunciation, then the student is more likely to have poor pronunciation himself. Now we're moving on to communicative activities that are task-based. Most of the ones that are listed in Chapter 6 in Nation and Newton's book are negotiation activities. Negotiation activities are when a learner actively listens to a speaker and provides feedback. The feedback can be asking for information to be repeated or to be expanded on. Sometimes a listener needs a definition or an example for a word. All these are examples of giving feedback. One thing to keep in mind with this is that some of our speakers may be coming from cultures where novices are not allowed to ask experts questions. We want to make sure our students understand that we want them to ask questions, even when they practice with each other. We may want to provide training or examples of how to negotiate when they're speaking so that our students feel comfortable asking for an additional information or perhaps another word or a definition. The book lists quite a few communicative activities that are task-based. I've listed a few of them here. Let's see, comparing items, ranking items, giving advice, which they call the agony column. Somebody writing to an advice column when this person is experiencing some kind of personal agony. That kind of threw me off for just a second. Let's see, split activities. These are also called jigsaw activities. This is when when you have partner up the students and neither student has the complete information, but each student has partial information. Though when the students work together, they're able to negotiate and come up with all of the information. Two more examples of activities: modifying statements and completing a map. Now, there are several factors that affect negotiation. I have listed one that I feel is probably the most important. The most important factor determining whether learners adjusted their output, the speakers adjusting their output or what they say, was the type of signal made by their partner or the listeners. So the speakers would adjust what they said according to the requests or the signals given by the listeners. And there are some types of signals listed that the book talks about. Something to keep in mind is that, like I mentioned before, we may want to train our students on how to use negotiation and how to ask for clarification or confirmation. Is this what you mean? Those kinds of ideas. We may want to practice those in class. Let's see, the first activity 14 for this week from the 50 Essentials book was, activity 14. It was reporting back. Reporting back is an activity that provides a gap between speaking and listening. After completing a task or experience, students use vocabulary linked to that task or experience to explain their process or what they thought about the activity to the class. So there's the speaking portion. And then the student writes about this experience in a daily learning log. So there's the writing portion. So the reporting back has two parts, the speaking and the writing. And it's important that students use the vocabulary associated with that activity or experience so that they're practicing that vocabulary. The final activity for this week was number 46. It is giving oral reports or presentations with multimedia. Now, most of us as instructors use multimedia in our PowerPoints and our presentations. Many of our books come with multimedia files, for example, audio files or photographs. We often use these in class to give our students a better understanding of the ideas, concepts, and vocabulary we are trying to teach. Now, the book suggests that we encourage our students to share their ideas using multimedia. And the book outlines a process to do this. First of all, we should model the particular multimedia we'd like our students to use. Now, Dr. Atez was very kind and provided us with a model for using the Screencast-O-Matic, though of course we were also allowed to use another multimedia that provided a video with a PowerPoint. We should also introduce the new media slowly. We should add new media carefully to the students' repertoire. And we should let students practice the new media so they have adequate time to feel comfortable and confident using this new media. It's a good idea to let students work with partners. This will help them feel more confident, and the partners can help fill gaps in information that the students don't have. And lastly, we should assign a multimedia presentation so students have the chance to become experts in using this particular multimedia and show it off. But why bother using multimedia in oral reports or presentations? The use of audio visuals of many types helps students and teachers to connect vocabulary and meaning, particularly for English learners. I'd also like to say that multimedia provides a more engaging environment for students. Not only if they're the student and we're the instructor using multimedia to give the lesson for the day, the students are generally more engaged if we can have an audio file and a video, but also for students as when they take their turn giving the presentations, having them use the multimedia is far more engaging than just having them draw stick figures on the whiteboard. And this concludes our discussion for this week, week 5. Please have a great week.